Good morning to you once again. Thank you so much for joining us on Monday's edition of Morning at NTV. I am Priscilla Regina Naloga, and our kickstarter this morning is going to be a full-blown debate. The Riles enforced disappearances in Uganda, and also checking on the conduct or the misconduct of legislators in the House, which is the Parliament of Uganda. Now, the backbone of it is that Muslim members of Parliament protested against the disrespect of the sanctity of the mosques by security agencies which enter the places of worship with their shoes on as they carry out arrests. The riot was orchestrated by the fresh arrest of Muslim cleric Sheikh Yahya Ramadan Mwanje under investigations of terrorism and police attacks. Now, on a similar note, Ugandans have been bewildered by the continuous drone disappearances and other security leaks on people's safety. In another regard, regarding safety, security, discipline, you do have the Parliamentary Committee on Rules, Privileges and Discipline recommending last week that Ms. Persis Namuganza be censured on account of her conduct not being befitting of a member of Parliament nor a minister. In a report, the committee also held that being cognizant of the fact that Parliament approved her appointment as a minister, it recommends that the House evokes Article 118 of the Constitution and Rule 106 of the Rules of Procedure to censure her. We dive into these conversations with my pundits this morning. Now, next to me is Mr. Siraje Chifampa, who is a political activist. Good morning to you, and you're most welcome.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
All right. Next to him, I am joined by Sarah Birete. In all your capacities, this morning is going to be a very deep conversation for you. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Priscilla, and good morning, viewers.
All right. And next to her, we are joined by Ambassador Mayiga Henry, Consul General for Uganda's Consulate in Dubai. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Priscilla, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's a pleasure to have all of you. Now, let's talk about starting with the security and safety of the clergymen in our country. We did have 2 weeks ago the arrests of Sheikh Yahya Mwanje being brought into Parliament last week, where you did have the caucus of the Muslim members of Parliament tabling a motion and saying that we're going to call for a nationwide strike if he is not returned to us, and that definitely caused a lot of stir here and there. On the other end, they got some sort of response, but then it comes down to show you that there's some disrespect and some misconduct in how agencies are conducting their way around some of these arrests. Let me start with you, Mr. Chifampa.
Yes, thank you so much. In 2016, prior to 2016, there was the assassination of Major Shigondo in Masanaf. Back then, the IGP was Kari Kaihura. And for him, whenever a high-profile murder like that could happen, the first thing he could come on site and say, it is ADF that is doing this. Mm-hmm. So when you begin by drawing conclusions without carrying out investigations, you destroy the entire process of investigating what actually caused this. Now, police decided to go around to begin doing things that would inform what their boss said. They came to Makasero Mosque, raided the mosque, planted ammunitions in the mosque in the wee hours of the night. Then the next morning, they arrested several people and said that they found guns and other ammunitions in the mosque. So I went to court, and I challenged that. Thank God, police failed to prove it to court that ammunitions were found in the mosque, because my argument was that is Entebbe Road, where the president used to pass on a daily basis. We are in the center of the city where all security agencies are based. How can ammunitions be hidden in a mosque and the security agencies are not aware? And the president is using that road on a daily basis. That means that you're posing a threat to the president who is using that road. So in the court ruled and in my favor, and the sanctity of the places of worship, the court ruled that it has to be protected. But unfortunately, we're in a government which does not respect the rule of law. Today we can talk of courts of law coming out and pronounce themselves on the way how places of worship should be respected, their sanctity to be kept. But the next day, police does to the contrary what the court ruled. Now, coming to the issue of Sheikh Yahya, I didn't want to single him out, because abductions have been here since time immemorial. What this government accused of the previous regimes of Panda Girl and people missing, this government has done it more than even the previous regimes did. Because if you look at what happened in the November of 2020, the riots that were in Kampala, since then the president even came on the media before the cameras and said that there were commandos that came from Somalia, killed some, and abducted some people. The Minister of Internal Affairs by then was J.J. Odongo, I think, came in Parliament and came up with a list and said, these are the only people that we have, but I cannot even guarantee you where they are. The opposition came up with a very long list, and the minister could not account for anyone. So many people are missing. Called the attention of the media because he's a leader. But I think so many Ugandans are crying for their lost loved ones who are nowhere to be accounted for. Others are charged in court martials when they've never been in security, whatever, trained in any security, whatever profession. But the government is here and is not giving any answers to that effect. So I think since we are with the ambassador here, we'll be getting some answers from him. All
right. Before we get to the ambassador, Sarah, in respect of what he has submitted and shared with us, the continuous disrespect of houses of worship, but also we seem to be seeing a continuous pattern of Muslim clerics being arrested, murders in some areas of time, and he refers to the fact that we're seeing sort of a repetition of history happening today.
I think that is true because it's a matter of fact. You know, facts speak for themselves. The NIM regime went to the bush on claims of abuse of human rights. But when they captured power, especially after lifting of term limits and age limits, it's as if they made a decision to perfect the instructions of previous regimes. When it comes to gross abuse of human rights, we have increasing torture, increasing kidnaps, increasing detentions without trial, and increasing extrajudicial killings, among other abuses. We also have a declining respect for rule of law, and that is both on the part of the security agencies, but also the vigilance of courts when it comes to matters regarding human rights, matters regarding detentions, matters regarding political persecution. There is also a decline on the part of courts. These matters have not started yesterday, but unfortunately for the Muslims, from the time of terror attacks in 2001, there has been particular persecution without justification of Muslim leaders in this country. And it's very unfortunate because a religion alone cannot amount to being a crime. Or you cannot criminalize a religion or a faith group, it is very wrong. The regime, we can refer to the Uganda Human Rights Commission reports, which captured kidnaps. We can refer to the 2022 Rule of Law Index released by the World Justice Project, where Uganda became 128 out of the scored 140 countries. And 2 weeks ago, Freedom House released the report on enjoyment of civil and political rights, and Uganda scored 34%. You know, that is beyond a retake. If it's an exam, you repeat the year. You can't even qualify for a retake. The UN Human Rights Council a few weeks ago confirmed the gross abuse of human rights. Even after a spirited defense by our Attorney General and his team, the facts still were speaking for themselves at the level of UN Council. And 2 days ago, the UK government released a list of sanctions. They also double sanctioned the former IGP under the Global Magnitsky Act. But I think they should have updated and sanctioned people in charge of kidnaps. So the question for me to the ambassador is, who is kidnapping Ugandans, who
Okay.
is torturing Ugandans.
Those are two questions that the ambassador is now put to task to answer. Now, allow me to supplement those, Ambassador. You're here in the capacity of the Yellow Cab, which has been governing this country for 36 years, something that you hold of pride. But I wonder if, when you were projecting what it would be like 36 years into the future at that time of having won the war, this is what you projected. This is the Uganda that you projected. And if it's not the Uganda that you projected, then why are we here and yet we are having this conversation at the backbone of the 10th of December? We're just celebrating the World Human Rights Day.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. First of all, right from the outset, I just want to say that I'm not aware of a government in this country that has put in place pieces of legislation and that has put in place institutions to combat human rights violations. Sarah has just mentioned the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which has produced yearly reports, and that's great. Plus, and as far as the political situation in our country is concerned, we have pieces of legislation to protect those rights. The Constitution itself speaks about the protection of people's rights in this country. The Constitutional Court is a point of reference in as far as respect for human rights is concerned, and many people, including Mwanga Chivumbi, have been there. And so, in as far as pieces of legislation and the commitment of this government in as far as respect for human rights is total. And I want to believe that that job is continuous. It's a process. You do not expect that 100% performance in as far as respect for human rights is going to be achieved in just the space of, should I say, since 2005 when we adopted the new constitution and put in place so many pieces of legislation. That compared to what is happening in the US, where human rights violations also occur, and yet that country has had democracy for the last 250 years, is so informative in as far as I'm concerned. That is number one. Number two, Uganda is a country that is placed in the region that is suffering from a lot of insecurity, from lots of cross-border gun trafficking, and that adds to our problems in this country, plus all sorts of rebel groups that continue to recruit, train, and infiltrate the country to carry out all sorts of activities that will definitely invite the wrath of security forces. So when you are in this kind of situation, definitely the security forces are definitely going to respond to whoever appears. And of course, basing on intelligence, we cannot sit in this studio and we think that we have the monopoly of consuming intelligence reports. In this country, the biggest consumer of intelligence reports is the president himself. And that is provided in the Constitution. And I want to believe that the security forces in this country actually act on those intelligence reports. How they do it probably is what we should be discussing. And the president has been very, very clear about that, because he has come out on several occasions to explain that security forces, yes, they are duty bound. They are duty bound to look out for those people who are involved in these kinds of activities that compromise the security of this country. In this country, in which I've lived for almost 60 years, there was a time when the situation was extremely so bad, like in the 1970s when Idi Amin was in power in this country. There were no human rights at all to speak about. But human rights, in my view, and the protection of them is a continuous process, and it's a responsibility for all of us to make sure that human rights are not only enjoyed, but also protected. And therefore, when you confront, like what I saw shortly before the elections of 2021, January, people confronting the police with stones, with hammers, with arrows and bows, and you expect that the security forces are going to massage those kinds of people, I mean those people who are doing those things. That definitely doesn't. And I'm not trying to say that there are angels in the police. The police force is full of angels. I'm not trying to suggest that, because you'll find some of them actually becoming overzealous when they are carrying out these arrests. And that's what brings me to the next point, which has been talked about by my colleagues. Abductions or arrests, there will always be arrests, whether it's in Uganda, in the US, in France, the Yellow Vests, if people remember, and quite a number of people were killed, I think 11 of them, because those protests actually had become violent, and so the security forces definitely came in. And it was so violent because people were burning down cars, they were burning buildings, and so on and so forth, on the streets in Paris and in the rest of the cities in France. And how did the security forces respond? Most aggressively. In the UK, in 2008, when they had those riots, I think 8 people got killed by security forces because people had become violent. Of course, our laws in this country provide for the enjoyment of the right to demonstrate, but not to violently do so. And the moment you do so, there are going to be repercussions for you. The security forces definitely will respond. And the security forces, I've seen the SWAT in the US, the SWAT. You're aware of the security forces which are called SWAT in the US. How they arrest, some of them actually are not in uniform. And so it's not something that is really falling out of the sky, that security forces in this country sometimes do not even wear uniform to arrest those who break the law. So because I've heard about abductions, vis-a-vis arrests.
All we're hearing is comparison versus correction. What we want to hear moving forward is how do we correct this, or how do we stop this, because this nature of violation of human rights has not existed, and so suddenly it's here, but we are seemingly embracing it and nothing is being done about it by government. But Sarah, you do have a response to him before you come in. Okay. Has he responded to your question?
No, I want to say 3 things. One is that there are human rights violations in the US. But I think we need to distinguish with what is happening here. In the US, there is racism and victimization of black people. And that is the genesis of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's not institutional. In our case, we have human rights violations conducted by institutions, security organs, that are paid by a taxpayer to protect citizens with their property. And saying, comparing arrests with abductions is misleading. Abductions in this country are conducted by vehicles, numberless vehicles commonly known as drones. Even traffic cannot identify them. No institution has owned them. The police, the army, they are all denying knowledge of numberless drones. And they take people in the night. They don't tell them. Arrests are defined in Article 23 of the Constitution. Identify yourself as arresting officer, inform the person the crime they've committed, tell their next of kin where you are going to detain them, allow access of lawyers, doctors, etc., and produce them in court within 48 hours. Are those the arrests you're talking about, Ambassador?
Sarah, because I was coming actually to that, then I was cut short. Because you and I and him and quite a couple of others have not come into an interface with the security forces. The reason being, we are not lawbreakers. I think that should be made very clear. The security forces in this country will definitely go for anyone, whether it is during the day or at night. Because you see, the commission of crime cannot be confined to a day or night. And the police will not wait until it is day, like we do in church, where they say that you must conclude a wedding before 6, it must have been concluded. But the security forces are active even throughout the night. And so the commission of crime, whether during the day or at night, security forces are going to come for you. They haven't come for me because I have not committed a crime. But should I choose to commit a crime tomorrow, definitely they're going to come for me. There is no doubt about it. And for you, Sarah, to say that this is institutional, yes, the security forces are actually institutional. These are institutions created by acts of parliament. And they have been assented to by the president, and so they become law. And therefore, within that orbit, the security forces have to act whenever, and for purposes of protecting the lives of all of us. And I was coming to say that, look, even the security forces are not angels. You remember I was beginning on that argument. You don't expect that there are angels, that everybody in the police is an angel. And therefore, some of them are definitely going to become overzealous, the way they arrest people. There's no doubt about that. But for me, my concern should be, even if the security forces sometimes actually act as overzealous, what are the mechanisms in place that can be used to manage that overzealousness by the security forces? For me, that's where I'm concerned, because I've seen these things in most of these countries where I've been. In most of the countries where I've been is that you always have these people who are overzealous. Now, suffice to say also that even within those who oppose government, there are people who are not angels. There are people definitely who are, I don't want to use the word black sheep, because we are black, so I don't want because the white man came here and confused us by referring to us, and everything that is black is bad. But there are also, amongst those who oppose the government, people who actually go overboard and they have absolutely no respect for the law. And therefore, once people decide to do those kinds of things that actually compromise the security of this country, the security forces definitely are going to act. There is absolutely no doubt.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Coming to you, Mr. Chifampa, in regards to what you said, if a person has committed a crime, they must be arrested. But of course, Sarah has shared how that order of arrest should be conducted. That's one. Two, even if someone has committed a crime, they're still innocent until proven by the courts of law that they're guilty, which then requires them to be presented before courts of law for that judgment to be passed according to what is presented as the evidence. So in respect of all this, and he's saying that the people are not angels, but the institute should be angelic, nevertheless, in its dispensation of its powers, in what it's supposed to be doing. So how did that happen for you? Have you seen that happening in the arrests that have been conducted with the people that you know?
Before coming to that, when you say that the people in the security forces are not angels, you'll also give the previous regimes an excuse to say that those that did the acts that you're talking about were also not angels, they were also overjealous and the like. Because in the past we had Pandagali, we had Mpawa Talikaba, those are the trucks that were going around Kampala, robbing and arresting people and killing others. Today we have drones. Whenever you talk of an arrest in Kampala, you're talking about a drone. When Yahemanyi was abducted in Nakasero, I went to the nearby police post. I inquired about whether there was any information about the arrest, the abduction. They told me, no, we don't have any information about it. So they referred me to CPS, in the department of, is it called flying squad, like some kind of squad? So I went there. They told me, we are not aware of an operation that has been conducted in that area. So we remained in this space that we could not know who came and abducted our leader. Later on, after 2 days, the army came out and said that we're the ones that are having him. But we wanted to go and visit this gentleman because he had been in prison for some times back, and he came out very sick. So he had to be on medication, and we wanted to go take him some clothes, give him some medicine. We were denied access to him for almost a week, not until he was released. And the members of parliament of the parliamentary caucus, in fact, went and almost demonstrated at CMI. They said we're not leaving this place until we see him. So that's when they gave them access to him. And we're wondering, if someone is arrested, if you call it an arrest, why do you deny him access to
take them to CMI?
In fact,
citizens are not supposed to be arrested at CMI.
Why do you deny him access to the doctor or the medication? The family members want to give him some kind of changing of a cloth and whatever, but they denied us all that access. But today we are here, and the ambassador is saying that those who are doing that are not angels. Secondly, there are mechanisms that are trying to put right the wrongs they're doing. But today, ever since we saw the tortures that happened in courts of law, people are coming leaping with fresh wounds in courts of law, and courts rule. I remember Justice Oguri, is it Oma Oguri, who said that they should be compensated 70 million shillings. None was done. Nobody has ever been paraded in a court of law as a result of torture that this one is being accused of torturing a citizen of Uganda. We saw the military, the army men beating journalists at the UN headquarters here in Kololo, and nobody was charged. So we are here, and the president just writes a letter that torture is no longer tenable in this country, and so many other, but with no action. Tangible results can be seen that the government is committed to end this kind of acts. That's why we say it is institutional. It's the government that is supporting the kind of acts.
So regarding the arrest of Sheikh Mwanje, he's returning to court on the 17th of this month, right? On a different matter.
On a different matter. That is the matter case that is labeled against him for Major Chigundu.
Okay.
But can you imagine, Major Chigundu was killed in 2016. Up to now, the case had not begun.
So what are the exact charges?
When he was taken to CMI this time round, he was released on a bond, and no charges were labeled against him. So they said that when they were trying to link some information, maybe he has some links with the attacks on the police stations and the whatever. So that's what they said.
All right. Ambassador Maega, you have referred to they're not angels. So does that mean that they're devils? And if they're devils, then how do we remove the devils from the system so that we can have an angelic system?
You see, Sarah also referred to
maybe criminals.
the CMY.
Keeping law and order.
Sarah referred to the CMY as not being a detention center, and she reminded me about Guantanamo Bay, which the US has been using, and yet it's not really one of those detention centers, according to the law in the US. But you see, all these kinds of things will always happen in all countries, that probably the detention centers are full, and so some people are definitely going to be taken to others. That one I've seen. That one I've seen, yes. And it will continue for as long as people break the law, I can assure you. So the safest way is to not break the law. The moment you break the law, they will take you wherever they choose. I am telling you. So anyway, going to the question which you have raised, that is everybody angelic? Well, in heaven I hear of archangels and angels, those two titles. And whether actually they are devils. The other day, the president was talking about Kawukumi in the police, you remember? So probably he was referring those to the Kawukumi group as those who are not angels in the police. And the process of weeding them out, I think, went with the former IGP, as you remember. But of course, the important one for me, which I want to stress, is that, yes, we condemn the security forces most times. In fact, even the Uganda Human Rights Commission itself has touted the narrative, or has parroted the narrative of the opposition in this country, that these are abductions, and they talk about that. But in my view, those are arrests. For as long as you break the law, the security forces are going to come for you. The best we can do, you and I and everybody in this country, is to make sure that we actually don't break the law. We can enjoy our rights, democratic rights in this country, without breaking the law. And we can make our point through all sorts of avenues, including Parliament.
Being generic. Coming back to you, Sarah, in regards to this whole political shake-up and the security gap, what could be sparking it off, actually?
You know, I think we should also look at the double tongue of the president. And I want to point on two occasions. During the Arua fracas, when Honorable Chagulanyi was beaten, the president, while addressing media, said that, and I quote, "I heard that an MP was beaten. I asked for a video clip. I watched the clip, and actually the MP was beaten properly." End of quote. During the last iPod summit in Kororo, immediately after elections, when the issue of abductions was raised, the president said that he is aware and he has seen about 50 people in State House Entebbe. He said they are undergoing rehabilitation and they will be returned home. So those two statements are admissions by the head of state of this country, a fountain of honor, commander-in-chief of security forces, of torture and abductions under his command. So we don't need to beat about the bush. Commander-in-chief of security forces says, "I watched the clip and an MP was actually beaten properly. I have 50 of the so-called missing persons in my backyard. They are just undergoing rehabilitation," meaning that his security is in charge of abductions. Ambassador, we don't need to beat about the bush. Police is on record to have said they do not know who operates numbers, minibuses that kidnap people, known as drones. They have said this on press conferences, also before Parliament, while investigating abductions, the Human Rights Committee of Parliament. The army has denied knowledge of drones and abductions.
So no security agencies.
But ambassador seems to know, because he's saying it is a normal. So who is abducting Ugandans?
There are no abductions in this country. There are arrests.
Maybe he needs help with investigations.
For as long as people break the law.
Okay.
And it's good she's bringing the Arua
as you conclude on that story.
Yes, and also another issue I want to refer to, the ambassador did insinuate that citizens attack police and they throw stones. Even if that was true, the police is required to react with proportionate force. So when a stone is thrown at you and you fire and kill, is it an extrajudicial killing? Is that proportionate force? Or when you go to arrest and instead of arresting, you are executing people on suspicion that they've committed a crime. Those are extrajudicial killings. And there is no difference with what Idi Amin was doing. So we should not romanticize crime in this country.
Okay, all right. We do have Mr. Chifampa here. How do we unromanticize crime in Uganda right now? What should actually be taken as action steps, not words, not assumptions, not looking good on screen and saying the good script, but the action to protect the human rights of every single Ugandan at the end of the day, those that are free and those that are, you know, taken away in these drones and unknown for that matter up to now?
First of all, it should be the political will. If the president and the entire government, state agencies have the political will or have the will of protecting the rights of Ugandans, I'm telling you, we shall have proper human rights in Uganda. But today, if the president comes out and says that we got commandos from Somalia, they came and killed some people and arrested some before the cameras and said some were killed and others were arrested. So I'm telling you that statement resonates to the officer who is in charge of arresting, because what the president said is okay for them to kill. In fact, I was watching a clip when the president was talking about the demonstrations, but the police force is always trained to be provoked and respond to those provocations, not with the use of live bullets. There are so many mechanisms they can use to protect the lives of Ugandans, but I'm telling you today, killing Ugandans is as cheap as killing anything like a cock or whatever, because death has been normalized, extrajudicial killings have been normalized, and it's normal. So I think it's the president, it begins with the president. Check his language, prosecute those ones who are perpetrating the tortures, who are perpetrating the abductions, because today Ambassador is saying that there are no abductions, but I'm telling you there are so many families in Uganda that are still crying. They've never seen their loved ones since 2021 elections, and they've not been brought to courts of law that they can say that they are being charged of this offense. So you cannot say that there are no abductions in Uganda when people are missing every other day. So I think it begins with the government before it comes to anyone else. Ambassador,
if they're not abductions, people missing, then what are they?
Arrests.
What constitutes an arrest for you?
Should I answer Sarah or should I answer Priscilla? Because she referred to Arua. Arua was a very interesting spectacle, because here is a situation where the presidential convoy was actually being pelted with stones, and also somebody brought a grader to finish it, to crash into the presidential convoy, and you expected that the SFC would just sit idly by and watch these things unfold? No, definitely that wouldn't be a state in which I would want to live. There should be security for everybody, whether it is security for the president, whether it is security for Sarah or any other person in this country, including myself. That security is extremely important. And I think I've talked about the security forces, that there are people probably who are not angels there.
So the ones that
and
are being
sometimes they become overzealous when it comes to executing their roles.
Is that abductions or are they being arrested?
These are arrests in my view.
In your view?
These are arrests.
And that is your view as an individual, as a representative of the government?
Priscilla, you see, it is because you haven't broken the law that you can survive these things. But should you choose tomorrow, or myself, should I choose tomorrow to break the law, definitely the security forces are going to come for me.
Okay, speaking of breaking the law, you do have the Parliamentary Committee on Rules and Privileges and Discipline having a lot of work as it comes to the end of the year. Currently, the concern in censuring of Minister of Lands, Persis Namuganza, is on their table. You did have also MP Zake being summoned to the same committee, of course, disciplinary issues in the same regard. So we're seeing a lot of working on indiscipline in Parliament. Let me pick your mind on this, Mr. Chifampa. The continuous indiscipline in Parliament. What do you make of this particular case of censuring the Minister of Lands Passes Namuganza?
First of all, I don't think that Honorable Passes Namuganza will behave in the way she behaved before that Parliament without a force behind her. I believe there is a force behind her, maybe of a big boss, who is in support of her, probably. Because I saw the Prime Minister pleading to her to come and apologize to the House. And the statement she made in terms of like making an apology that if I hurt anyone, I regret, was like demeaning and not respecting the House as well. So I think, like we've seen so many people misbehaving, junior ministers misbehaving before senior ministers, or junior officers misbehaving before senior officers, and they go scot-free and nothing happens to them. So maybe my assumption is that maybe she's having someone who is behind her, who is in support of her actions. Secondly, this is not the first time that Honorable Namuganza has been rocking horns with the heads of the Parliament, like the Speaker. I remember when the time of Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, she also had issues, and even the elections of becoming a SEC member, she stood against her, and so many words were said. So she still has other problems with the current Speaker. So I think that there should be a force behind her that is making her behave the way she does.
All right, Sarah, in regards to the same conversation, is it the case of she has a point that she's trying to make, or is it a case of perhaps feeling like she's above the law and getting her to the place of censuring?
You know, before I get to Namuganza, I want to point out some aspects of total degeneration of conduct at Parliament on a general perspective. If you look at the way the 11th Parliament is conducting its business, there is total lack of decorum, even when it comes to the leaders of Parliament that are supposed to instill decorum in the members. After elections, there were pictures of a Deputy Speaker of Parliament arriving at the House, you know, like a movie superstar. And maybe that was excitement, but is it necessary at that level? You are number 5 in order of precedence in the country. Why do you behave like a movie star that is suffering from a rivalry? Recently we see, you know, there is no difference between people's private and public lives, and things that are supposed to be done in people's private homes are being done at Parliament, even before the coat of arms. So I think really the first check should be on the leadership of Parliament and their conduct, because they are the ones who should later check the conduct of MPs, and once for them they are out of control, then they have no more authority to check the others. When it comes to the issue of Zake was ruled out of order by the Deputy Speaker while presiding over the House on the ground that Zake raised on a matter of national importance without following the rules of Parliament and informing the Speaker prior. The rules demand, yes, that if you have a matter of national importance, you first inform the Speaker and it's put on order paper. But the conduct of Parliament before Zake outburst has been people randomly raising on matters of importance without following the rules. So when it comes to checking Zake, even the leadership should check how have they been conducting the House without following the rules themselves. They created the culture that allowed Zake also to raise a matter of national importance like that. The first mistake is with them. When it comes to Namuganza and the issue that has brought her to the censure process is the allocation of Naguru land to quack investors, quack American investors, on the directive of the president. It is true the president directed that land be allocated to those fake investors, fictitious. So the first issue at stake is, how does the president do his business? Does he have a research team? Does he do due diligence? How do you allocate prime land to fictitious people?
Okay.
So, but Namganza then implements the order. Let me go first. Namganza implements the order of the president, and it brings her into contention. Her conduct before the committee, they invite her, she doesn't come, she runs to court. Court says, no, you have not been denied, you know, a right to a fair hearing, go back to the committee. And later she, you know, she comes at loggerheads with the committee. She's wrong. She's wrong. But the whole parliament is conducting itself in a manner that is not dignified, and they are demeaning the institution that is a temple of democracy in this country.
Okay, let's hear closing remarks on this matter from Ambassador Mayiga in regards to MPs claiming the display and conduct of the Minister Namugan's impunity. It's concerning to people in power. It shows a totally derailing picture of our Ugandan leadership.
Well, for me, I just want to believe in the one of the provisions of modern management, that every institution has to have a system of or a mechanism of self-correction. And here is Namuganza being accused by the system in Parliament, and she's also, of course, doing some rebuttals and so on and so forth. And I just want to believe that definitely somewhere in the middle of these discussions on the floor of Parliament, whether it is the leadership in the Parliament which is wrong, or whether it is Namuganza herself who is wrong, something definitely is going to come out, because I want to believe that this Parliament of ours has got some level of corrective measures they have in place that can address these kinds of problems. So I want to believe that if they, like Sarah says, that Parliament has been behaving that in that fashion, the conduct has not been probably up to 100%. I think, in my view, this is a litmus test.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for your submissions. Now, of course, we do have MP Zake appearing before this committee tomorrow. We await to see the proceedings of that, and so we shall keep our ears to the ground at the end of the day. But leadership starts from you and I, and so if we're in a better position of conduct and feel the weight and responsibility of what we've been given, and make sure that it benefits those that you're representing, or those that are below you, it will go a better way in serving Ugandans as a whole. It brings us to the end of this conversation. Coming up is Tech Note, in which we get to look at the importance of life skills-based education. Stay with us.